This video today is to kind of try to put in words of how idiotic it is to think that women not only should be allowed but also be forced to be something they aren't, and that's to be a man. Women have been trying to get into certain sports for probably more than 20 years. One was the Ladies Professional Golf Association, which was always predominantly for men. Now, it is very true today that though women are able to play golf, they are in their own league. They do not actually compete with male counterparts. And why? Because it was not intended that women should play golf or any other sport. And what ended up happening was they got their own way. Like most times, women complain enough, and it happens that they just kind of force themselves on men, and men have to kind of accept that they're not going to stop. And now the next part of this fiasco, what I call it a fiasco, is they're not only wanting to do sportscasts during football games, they want to be the actual referees who make the decisions about calls on the field. And any man can see that the woman is never going to be a part of the actual sport, because they realize it themselves, as do men, that there are certain contact sports women physically can't handle. And if you think it's bad enough with men getting head concussions all the time, you'd probably end up killing a woman out on the field, only out of her arrogance of thinking that she's capable of doing it. And then she puts her own life on the line by thinking, well, I can do what you can do. And then, bam, it's not no concussion, you've actually suffered a brain hemorrhage. But what is the primary purpose of this video today is to emphasize one commercial has been airing on the networks and on television the last couple of weeks, months, and it's done by the now defunct AT&T. It's now just called Advanced Telephones.
This is history in the making. Cortez, 23 years old, first woman in the majors.
Never miss a moment.
This is a feminist ad for the inclusion or the idea that a woman would ever be a part of the Major League Baseball Association. And the Major League Baseball group is just like the PGA. They did not intend for women to ever be a part of the sport, because why? Women physically cannot handle types of sports where it's excruciatingly hard. Not only the amount of abuse you go through, but that women just can't physically do certain things. They know that, but they can't see themselves accepting the reality of that. So they continually, over and over and over, saying, "We can do this. You're a bigot. You're a sexist. You're not blah 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 blah." And men cave in and let them do this stuff. And that's why, at least as far as the Professional Golf Association, you have them playing in their own group of playing golf. And I guarantee you, those rules for the women are not the same as they are for the men, because men can do things a lot more physically. They have more stamina than women. And even now, even though they have their own organization, the women still aren't satisfied with being in their own association within the PGA. They want the opportunity, just sort of like arrogantly saying in a chauvinistic way that women can defeat male men pro golfers In other words, if there was a competition between the two of them, that the women, they just arrogantly stick their noses up and say, yes, we would win. And I know in the last 10 years, 20 years, that there has been one event where a woman wanted to play in a particular tournament, and she was booted out. And it made national headlines on all the networks that she was booted out. But then the PGA administration said to her, we have no law that permits women into this association, because it was never a bylaw or even a conception that it would have happened that women would want to do sports. And so if you want to do any kind of golfing, you have to create your own organization. In other words, we're not letting you in because it was never intended that way, that women should compete against men or that they should actually play that particular sport. Well, this ad on AT&T presently shows a black woman standing out on the field, and there is just this hoo-ha of background gibberish is what it is. And the emphasis is that this not only is a role model for girls, but that when they see her out there on their mobile device, that she is sort of like a synonym or a status quo to how Martin Luther King was seen during the civil rights era. That these individuals are just deities, they're gods to these younger girls who are playing softball, and that for this individual not to be given the same chance, or at least a better chance, or an advantage to get into the major leagues, is sort of like it's women saying we're slapped in the face again, And they keep bringing up the same stuff they've gone through since suffrage, when they finally were given the chance to vote and being given the same work opportunities as men, and they still complain and gripe that they're not making as much money as men. Well, I have to disagree on that, because if you look in the workplace, there's more women now than there's ever been. And they're in the positions they are because those individual men who were high enough in the companies had no choice but to give those women promotions because of sexual discrimination. So for them to say they're not making as much money, that's a lie, because they didn't get where they were just because of their ability or their skills or their IQ levels. It was because of the intimidation that's going on in this country, that women feel like they are being subjugated for whatever dumb reason or another, because of they still say it's a man's world, and I don't agree with that at all either. The only men who run the country are those in politics, but as far as women in any kind of a private sector job, and I don't care what kind you could possibly name, medical, law, anything, there is more women presence in that particular field than any other time in history. There's never been an onslaught, a saturation of one sex over another in the workforce in this country. And all I'm trying to get across in this video is to say to the women who might watch this video this: if you want to be in the major leagues, you're going to have to do just like what the Ladies Professional Golf Association did. You're going to have to create your own league, and this way you'll be under your own stipulation of rules, which women are given that advantage over men when it comes to doing certain types of very strenuous or very hard contact sports. Women don't have the same rules they follow by, and they'll use any excuse you can imagine to get their own way of what they're supposed to be allowed to use when they're out there on that field. And it's not going to happen for any woman to think that the major leagues would ever allow women in, because it's not going to happen. The only way it'll ever happen is that they create their own league. And, you know, for women to say, well, that's not fair, it's like, well, that's life. You got to accept it. One other sport that obviously people, and I've brought this up earlier, was about the National Football League. Now, women at this point in time in history are saying that they know better than to get out there and be hit in the head by some 800-pound man who is trying to get at the actual football that they're holding in their hands. They might be smart enough to figure I'm not going to be a quarterback and be blitzkrieged by these 3 or 4 guys and they suffocate me. But it is inevitable that once women can get into every other major league sport, from golf to baseball, it's inevitable football is next. And I think this will be the same thing. You'll have to create a type of league where women specifically play against themselves, because then you have the equal balance of another player who is built the way you are, and there is no disadvantage or an advantage between the two players. That's how they should look at every kind of sport. They ought to look at it from golf to baseball to football to whatever else comes about that they complain about, is if we can't pacify a woman, we have to pacify their desire by creating some kind of avenue or way out for them to do whatever it is they think they have to excel at beyond a man, and create a specific league of whatever sport for themselves. And that's the only way it's going to happen. But if you think if you as a woman could ever compete in the same under the same context, that when you walk into that locker room and you've got a shower with all these men and you think, oh, I can handle that, I got no problem with that, or that the men probably should feel an obligation to be more respectful enough to say, well, you can use this, or you can use his bathroom, or that, whatever. That's not fair or equal, because you're giving the advantage over that situation. And if you want to be equal, you have to be equal enough to be willing to do whatever it takes to do that situation, whether it be in the locker room, out on the field. I mean, they're not going to be out there patting your hand saying, it's okay, you dropped the ball, or whatever, And to be fair to both sexes, you should say, we know what a man can do, we've done it longer than anything else, and a woman wants to do it. It's like there is no equality there, physically or mentally, that you can say they can compete on that same level as a man, because it ain't going to happen. It never has happened. No matter how much a woman can brag that she's better than a man and she knows a lot more than a man, blah, 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 the worse off it's going to get for them, because eventually when they say it enough, a man's going to throw her into a football game, a baseball game, and say, you've got everything a man has, now do it. In other words, we're not going to be out there coaching you. We're not going to be watching to see if you're doing it right. You get hit in the head with a ball, honey, that's it. Nobody's to blame. And don't cry out, oh, because it ain't going to happen. I mean, a man's not going to do that. He's certainly not going to be respected, In other words, if you want to be equal, you go through the whole thing. You experience the whole thing. You accept whatever happens to you. That's what I'm trying to say. And this video today is basically a way of explaining to people who believe that women have more rights, more everything that entitles them to above and beyond what men for the past 100, 200 years have fought for, that women are entitled to it. They don't have to do nothing for it, blah, blah, blah. You're not being fair to yourself. You're not being fair to your own gender. You're not being fair to the profession itself by saying because you're a woman you're better, so therefore they've got to do everything that you ask them, only because the fact is you want to try to do something. You have to be fair and do it the way everyone else does it, not just the way you want to.